I never thought my fairy tale would end with a text message. I guess no one ever does. Up until that moment, I truly believed I was about to get my happily ever after. The wedding dress was already picked out, the flowers were ordered, and the rings, well, the rings were supposed to be chosen that afternoon. That's why, when my phone buzzed, I smiled automatically. I figured it was Eric, my fiancé, letting me know he was on his way. Maybe he was running late, not exactly a shock. He was never great with time. I opened the message without a second thought. And then my world stopped. I can't do this anymore. I'm not the right man for you. The wedding is off. I'm sorry. I read those words over and over again. I thought it had to be a joke, a mistake, some kind of misunderstanding. My heart pounded as I tried to call him, but it went straight to voicemail. I called again. And again. Nothing. I sent messages. I begged for an explanation. I pleaded with him not to throw everything away without at least talking to me. He never replied. And just like that, the man I thought I knew disappeared from my life without a trace. I spent the first few nights wide awake, staring at the ceiling, trying to figure out what I had done wrong. Had I said something that hurt him? Had I not shown enough love? Had he found someone better? The questions spun through my mind, each one more painful than the last. I pulled away from everything and everyone. I canceled the wedding by myself, calling every vendor, swallowing my humiliation as I explained there would be no ceremony. Isabella, my younger sister, was the first to show up. I was a wreck, and she hugged me so tight I almost believed her when she said everything would be okay. She brought ice cream, watched terrible movies with me, and helped me erase every trace of Eric from my apartment. She told me he wasn't worth my tears. For a while, I convinced myself she was right. I convinced myself that moving on was possible. But deep down, nothing made sense. Nothing. I couldn't accept how someone who once swore eternal love could just walk away, without even looking back. Eric vanished from all social media. I asked some mutual friends, but no one knew anything. Some seemed shocked by the breakup, while others dodged the subject like they were afraid of saying the wrong thing. I had this gut feeling that there was more to the story, a secret no one wanted to tell me. But at the time, I was too broken to even think about digging deeper. Life went on, mechanically. Isabella was by my side the entire time, helping me piece myself back together. She took me out, introduced me to new friends, and, though I hated to admit it, became the anchor that kept me from drowning. But even with all her support, the pain didn't go away. It was an open wound that refused to heal. And no matter how hard I tried to move forward, I still woke up in the middle of the night, waiting for a message, an explanation. Something that never came. 2 years passed, and I finally thought I was getting better. I had a new job, a new haircut, a new routine. I thought I was ready to leave the past where it belonged. But then the invitation arrived. A sleek envelope, gold details, elegant calligraphy. I assumed it was just another wedding, some coworker, an old classmate, someone I barely knew. I opened it without a second thought. And when I read the names on the invitation, the ground disappeared beneath me. Isabella and Eric. My sister was engaged. To the man who once promised to spend forever with me. I felt my heart stop for a second before it plummeted into a pit of betrayal and agony. Everything I thought I had overcome came crashing back with brutal force. It wasn't just that he had moved on. It wasn't just that he had found someone new. It was that someone new was my sister. And in that moment, I knew, my whole life had been a lie. My heart was pounding so loud I could barely hear my own thoughts. It felt like the world was spinning too fast, and I had been left behind, trapped in a never-ending nightmare. Questions flooded my mind. How was this even possible? When did it start? How did no one tell me? Why didn't Isabella say anything? I trusted her, blindly. She was my sister. My best friend. A sharp pain shot through my chest, like a knife slowly twisting inside me. Everything I knew, everything I believed in, was falling apart. I remembered every hug she gave me when I cried over Eric. Every comforting word, every promise that I'd be okay. Was it all a lie? I started piecing things together, reliving old conversations, remembering glances and laughter that once seemed innocent. And then, it hit me, Isabella had always been there. Always close to Eric, always laughing at his jokes, always praising his ideas. I trusted her so much that I never thought twice about it. She was my sister. I loved her. It never even crossed my mind that there could be something more. I remembered Eric once saying something about how Isabella seemed so mature for her age. At the time, I thought he was just being nice. Now, everything felt laced with hidden meanings. A dark sense of paranoia crept in. Who else knew? Who else had been laughing behind my back? The thought of everyone keeping this secret from me was suffocating. My parents? My friends? Had they all been conspiring against me? But above all, I kept wondering how Isabella had the nerve to do this. How could she watch me fall apart, crying over a man who was in her arms? How could she lie so effortlessly, for so long? The worst part was knowing that, at some point, I would have to face them. I couldn't run forever. I needed to confront Isabella, to hear the truth, even if it shattered me even more. But I wasn't ready. I had no idea how to find the strength to do it. The next few days were a blur of uncontrollable emotions. There was no room for forgiveness. I started avoiding Isabella. I ignored her messages, canceled family gatherings, and stayed away from any situation where I might run into her. I wasn't ready to face her. No matter how hard I tried to ignore it, the past kept haunting me. My parents began to notice my distance. They asked me, over and over, if I was okay. I always responded with the same fake smile and a quick nod. There was no way to explain what I was feeling. They wouldn't understand. Maybe they didn't even want to. After all, Isabella had always been the perfect daughter. The golden girl, as my mom liked to call her. Smart, charismatic, the little sister I had spent my whole life protecting. I didn't know how to shatter that image. I didn't know how to tell them that their perfect daughter had stabbed me in the back. Social media was a constant reminder of the cruel reality I was trying to ignore. Every one of Isabella's posts felt like a silent insult, a provocation disguised as happiness. She posted pictures smiling, talking about the happiest time of her life, never mentioning Eric. Not a single word about the engagement, about the upcoming wedding. It was as if she was keeping it a secret until the very last moment. In a surge of pain and anger, I started digging. I went through old pictures, searched for clues in forgotten comments, looked for dates that didn't add up. And slowly, a pattern began to emerge. They had been close for much longer than I had realized. There were family gatherings where Eric seemed to be standing closer to her than to me. Sweet comments, inside jokes that I once brushed off as innocent. It had all been right there, in plain sight. I just hadn't wanted to see it. I remembered one specific weekend, right before the breakup. Eric had told me he had to travel for work. I thought it was odd at the time, but he explained it so naturally that I didn't question it. Now, looking at Isabella's posts, I noticed that she had also traveled that same weekend, for a spiritual retreat in a nearby town. The truth was unbearable. They had been together long before I ever knew. I had been deceived, betrayed in every possible way. And as I pieced together the cruel puzzle they had created, I realized I had to confront them. I couldn't keep running away. I had to face the truth, even if it destroyed me. But more than anything, I needed to understand why. Why did they do this to me? And how could they go on as if nothing had ever happened? I had to face Isabella and Eric. I needed to hear the truth from their own mouths, even if every word ripped away another piece of what was left of me. For days, I prepared myself mentally, rehearsing conversations that would never happen. I knew I couldn't control what they would say or how they would justify themselves. But I had to be ready, not to fall apart in front of them. Deep down, the worst part wasn't just the betrayal. It was the fact that I still loved them. Love isn't something you can just switch off, even when the person you love is the one who destroys you. Eric was the man I once dreamed of building a life with. Isabella was my sister before she was anything else. The pain came from remembering what they had meant to me. I chose to confront them on an ordinary day, no grand gestures, no ceremonies. I drove to my parents' house, where Isabella was temporarily staying while planning the so-called wedding of her dreams. My mother was happy to see me after so much time apart. She had no idea of the storm I carried inside me. She hugged me with that genuine warmth, so proud of her two inseparable daughters. I walked up to Isabella's room, feeling the weight of the house where we had grown up together, where we had shared secrets, where we had laughed and cried side by side. I didn't knock. I didn't want to give her time to prepare. I walked in, determined. Isabella was surrounded by white fabrics and wedding planning papers, glowing, lost in a world that didn't include the wreckage she had left behind. The sight of her hit me like a punch to the gut. I didn't understand how someone could carry so much happiness while destroying someone else. She looked at me, startled. I didn't need to say much. My presence there, holding the invitation in my hand, was enough to drain the color from her face. That was what I wanted. Not explanations. Not apologies. Just for her to feel, even for a second, a fraction of the pain she had caused me. The silence between us was suffocating. And in that silence, I realized something. She wasn't sorry. There was shame, sure, but not guilt. That was it. Her happiness had always mattered more than my pain. She had made her choice long before any of this came to light. She had chosen herself. I let the invitation slip from my fingers, watching as it fluttered to the floor, a meaningless piece of paper now, compared to everything that had been destroyed. I turned and walked away. The last thing I heard before leaving was my mother asking why I was leaving so soon. I glanced back, saw the worry in her eyes. Part of me wanted to tell her everything, to lay the truth bare right then and there. But I knew this pain was mine alone. I didn't want to share it. As I got into my car, I felt it. I had done what I needed to do. I had faced the truth. I had accepted what had been shattered. There was no happy ending here. No redemption. All that was left was for me to rebuild what had been broken, piece by piece. I thought that facing Isabella and accepting the brutal truth would finally bring me some peace. But life has a strange way of laughing in your face just when you think you've survived the worst. A month after everything happened, while I was still trying to put my life back together, my mom asked me to help clean out Isabella's old room. She had left some boxes behind when she moved in with Eric, and my mom wanted to sort through them. Despite my hesitation, I agreed. In the middle of sorting through everything, I found a box filled with notebooks and loose papers. As I tried to organize them, a yellowed envelope slipped to the floor. Isabella's handwriting was unmistakable. The moment I started reading, my world shattered all over again, but this time, in a different way. Isabella wrote about a forbidden love, a feeling that consumed her in secret. She described how she fell for someone she could never have, how she fought against it, how she hated herself for wanting something so wrong. She met him first. Long before I even knew he existed. It was on a trip with mutual friends, something casual, a cruel coincidence. They exchanged glances, talked for hours, but nothing happened. When I introduced him as my boyfriend months later, she was already in love. And at that moment, she made the choice to bury her feelings so she wouldn't hurt me. Isabella admitted that she tried to forget him, that she distanced herself out of fear of betraying me, but the love she felt never faded. It grew in silence, fed by the unavoidable closeness, the family gatherings, the casual conversations where she pretended to be just my sister. The letter ended with an apology she never had the courage to give me. She never planned for any of this to happen, but she also couldn't stop it. She fought her own heart, and lost. I closed the letter with trembling hands. The sting of betrayal still burned, but now I understood there was so much more behind it all. It wasn't just selfishness. It was forbidden love, hidden feelings, impossible choices. I wasn't ready to forgive her, but I felt a strange sense of relief. At last, I had the truth. At last, I could let go. That night, I left the house, taking the letter with me. Not to confront her again, not to expose her secret, but to free myself from the weight I had carried alone for so long. I burned the letter in the middle of the night. And with it, I let go of the pain, the anger, and the past.